3. And their names are, in order of, no order, Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah, who, according to the rabbis, is also Hagar, is another word for Hagar, but according to the biblical story, that's probably doesn't seem to be the case. Who is this woman Hagar? Keturah. Later on in Abraham's life, near the end of his life, he takes a wife whose name is Keturah, and she bears him a number of sons. If you'll notice here, the bolded names are names of people who are identifiable as ethnic Arabs. How do we know that? How do we know that Midian, Medan, Sheva, and Dedan are Arabs? Because the names reflect geographical locations in Arabia, or they reflect social conditions or economic conditions that were typical of pastoral nomads, whereas Abraham represents a kind of transition from pastoralism to agriculturalism. So if you look, for example, Midian. You see the name Midian, Medan, and Midian? That's this area of Arabia. Who married a Midianite in the biblical tradition? Very important. Who? Moses. Moses married a Midianite, and Moses' children were children of Midianites. Okay? Ephah and Avedah and Elda'ah, these are all names that are associated with Arab locations in Arabia. Some of them are settled oases in the desert, and some of them are names of gods or ancient people that we know from Arabian genealogy. If we move down to verse 12, we'll see a reference to Hagar, who is defined here, identified as an Egyptian, and the names of her sons are Ishmael, and then Nevayot. These are the children of Ishmael, Kedar, Duma, Hadad, Tema, Yetur, Nafish, and Kedma. These are names that are not very familiar to you, except maybe one there. How many people know a Hadad? Anybody know here people whose last name is Hadad? And what's their national background? Lebanese, somebody said. What else? Syrian, anybody know? An Egyptian? Hadad is an Arab name, and it's an Arab name here as well. The reason why there's so many Hadads still to this day is that the word Hadad means smith. It's true. Okay, so that's interesting. Maybe it's interesting. Here we have a close relationship between Abraham and his descendants, at least this line of descendants, who represent pastoral nomads, Arabs, and they're in a relationship that is both symbiotic, they need one another, and there's also a relationship of tension. Now, where's the symbiotic relationship here? Something very interesting. I think you'll find this, I find it anyway, very interesting. How does one worship in the ancient world? Through, what's the ritual of worship? Sacrifice. And in the Bible, there is a statement, a reference to what the sacrifice should be for God. There is a term in Hebrew. It is reach nichoach, which means a calming smell. Now, if any of you have been at the location of a burning sacrifice, you'll probably have known that it doesn't really smell like barbecue in the backyard. It smells like burning flesh and hair and entrails. It's not a pleasing odor. It's not pleasant. So in the archaeology of temples in the ancient world, you have the Holy of Holies where the gods dwelt, similar kind of arrangement also in the temple in Jerusalem. You have the sacrificial altar where the animals are sacrificed and burned, and in between you have an incense altar so that the gods will smell the good smell instead of the unpleasant smell of the burning of the sacrifice. And where does incense come from? There's no incense grown in the Mediterranean area. Incense all comes from, you notice this here? Incense coast? Incense derives from South Arabia. South Arabia. And there are some words there in the genealogies that relate to South Arabia. go back to that first paragraph, Sheva is Sheba, probably the place where the queen came from as well. Hadramaut, we don't have it in this genealogy, but one of the genealogies in the Bible has Hatzarmavet, which is probably, it really is clearly a Hebrewisation of the Arabic word Hadramaut, which is a region, and those are the regions in which incense was grown. Then incense had to be transported north from here up into the Mediterranean. It went to Gaza, which was the closest port, and then it was sent around the Mediterranean to all the places where polytheistic sacrifices were held and where biblical sacrifices were held in the land of Israel as well. Who transported that incense from the south? Arab transporters, and Arabs in the south grew that incense. Now, in the ancient world, there was a location right here, halfway between the south and the north. We call it Mecca today. It was an ideal place for the Teamsters Union of the ancient Arabian world to have their headquarters, because it was in a perfect location to transport material from the south up into the north. And so, in the ancient world already, Mecca seems to have been a center for the camel caravan business. We have a reference to that business in the Bible. So if you look to page 2 here, you'll see Isaiah 60. This is a reference, this is a prophecy of what's going to happen in the future. Dust clouds of camels shall cover you, camels of Midian and Ephah. And by the way, Midian and Ephah were children of Abraham in these earlier genealogies. They shall come from where? Sheva, and they shall bear gold and incense, and shall herald the glories of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be assembled for you, the rams of Neviot shall serve you. Kedar and Neviot are also in the genealogies, children of Abraham. So we have this relationship already, and the relationship is one that is actually one in tension. If you look at Genesis 16 in the next box, we'll see an interesting reference. This is a reference to Ishmael. Ishmael. This is the angel who then speaks to Hagar and tells her what's going to happen to her new son she's about to have. And the angel of the Lord said to her, to Hagar, I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count. You shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, Yishmael. For the Lord has paid heed to your suffering. Yishmael in Hebrew means God hears. He shall be usually the translation here is wild ass of a man. His hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him. He shall dwell alongside all of his kinsmen. Now, Jewish tradition takes this reference to Ishmael as a negative condemnation of nasty behavior. But what this really is a phenomenological observation of the tension between agriculturalists and pastoral nomadists. He will be not a wild ass of a man. The word wild ass is a pere, as opposed to a hamor, which is a domesticated donkey. So he, as a pere Adam, is going to be really a wilderness man, somebody who lives in the desert, as opposed to an agriculturalist. And he shall have his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, because the way life worked in the ancient world, really up until this very day, one of the reasons why there's tensions between Bedouin and settled peoples, not only between the Bedouin and the Jews living in Israel, but Bedouin and Arabs everywhere, is that the Bedouin are pastoral, they move, and they need to have the produce that is produced, at least the minimum amount of produce that's produced by agricultural growers. The growers don't really need to have the nomads. In order for the nomads to make sure that they are needed, that they will get the produce that they need, they will raid or threaten to raid. This has been the standard operating procedure, raiding agricultural settled areas, and then create a kind of a protection racket so they can be sure that they will get what they need. In other words, they'll say, we will protect you from those other raiders over there, those other Arab Bedouin, and with that we will get the dates that we need in order to feed the camels so that we can do our long-distance trading in the desert. So there's a natural tension, and what this is really describing is the natural tension that's part of ancient Israelite world. Is that